Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League analyzing a game between Playway Cool and Spoonie. This was played in the last round of the Team 52 playoffs. The match score is 0-0, so the key here is win with white, draw with black. Let's see what happens. Okay, Queen's Gambit accepted. Generally, it's a pretty good line for either side. Black can often get equality, and at the same time, white can often get an advantage from his first move and preserve it. I don't know all the lines all that deep, but I know the general principles behind it. Okay, get the pawn back. And then black undergoes the correct strategy, playing symmetrically, getting ready to make an exchange of these two pawns on d4 and c5. The purpose of that is to reach a symmetrical formation with the pawns and go into an equal game and dare white to beat him. Okay, so castles. Now an alternative idea other than queen e2 is invite a queen exchange, and if black plays bishop takes c5, white will take on d8 and displace the king. For what it's worth, it's worth something. Keep the king in the center where he's a target. But if black takes, white retakes with the rook, and suddenly we reach this position, and white's a couple of tempi up. Where did black lose his time? Well, he's got this pawn on e6, and he hasn't castled. So white can just develop another piece, and black has to play catch up here in development. You know, just for example, b5, and then bishop b7. And the only drawback for white now is that this bishop on c1 is not very active. The alternative, and sometimes it happens in the QGA, is you will fianchetto it so this bishop comes back to e2, and you're going to be playing b3 and bishop b2. But it's a minor lead for development for white, and it could work out to something. Sometimes you just have to try it and see, because one more slip by black and you can build up a nice initiative because of the missing tempi. Okay, but for what it's worth, white ignores this chance, although it's maybe not a great chance. It's just a possibility. Okay. Probably black doesn't want to play b3 here because there will be a minority attack conducted against his pawns, and they may become weak, and if he loses them all, white ends in, or if they all get exchanges, rather I should say, the 3-2, white ends up with 5 pawns to 4, all on one side of the board, and eventually will be forcing a pass pawn on the d file. Anything can happen. Black's going to really be hard pressed to draw, but he would have some drawing chances. So c4 would just be bad. And then here, playing with the isolated queen pawn is often a good strategy because you have a lot of mobility around it. But just for the sake of argument, let's just play knight takes. Okay, look what's happened. Black has one piece developed, and white has all of his guys out except for the queen side. He's castled, the queen's developed, and he's got a minor piece developed. Black needs to get castled here. His best bet would be to play bishop e7, and now white can just go about his business. He's poised right now to play a4, and as we saw in the game, black did this. We'll see this in a moment. Now white gets another piece developed, and finally black castles, and it looks like white has just all kinds of leads in development here. You could even take with the rook on this square, and you're piling up on a6. So black's got it defended now, but he can't develop the queen knight, so he's going to develop the bishop. Wow, you know, white's just got all kinds of space here. There's got to be some decent alternatives that white would have to sit down and find out how to best coordinate his pieces. Um, if anything, bishop d2 gets the last guy developed and threatens to double rooks or swing a rook to the c file. I don't know if this is forced or not, but it was an alternative for white. Okay, so takes with the d pawn, and black kind of ignores castling just a moment, and white goes ahead and does what I said he could do, and then goes ahead with what we saw. Now there's some pressure on d4. Since white's got a development lead, maybe bishop e3 is good here. Let black take his time and get rid of that bishop, because doing so, now white's got the open f file, and his pawn is no longer isolated. They're hanging pawns. White has 3 pawn islands, black has 2. Black has the bishop pair, but look at all the development white has. This has to be worth something. So if bishop e7, you can just go ahead and throw knight c5 in right now, and if black liquidates it, you give back the advantage of the 2 bishops, and suddenly white has this advanced pass pawn. It was worth a shot. I don't know if it's forced, but it sure looks to me like white might have gotten a little bit here. And sometimes you just have to have the activity to threaten to get an initiative, and that's all it takes. Because one small error by your opponent, and the floodgates can start opening up. That's how grandmasters beat FIDE masters. The FIDE master makes a very tiny error, and the grandmaster finds the right plan and puts the squeeze on, and the poor FIDE master is just struggling. Even though he's a very talented player, the grandmaster is just playing precision moves. But anyway, this is just a possibility. We'll go back. Okay, so rook d1 is going to prepare some eventual tricks where you offer the d4 pawn and give a discovered check, or not a discovered check, a discovered attack. The bishop will check the king either on h7 or b5 if those possibilities open up, and that opens up a line for the rook to take the queen, and that's kind of what happens here in a little bit. Okay, knight takes a4, but now black has his counter, and well, not quite yet, almost. So black's almost caught up in development. Maybe this is the time when white might want to just play bishop e3. The drawback with that, should black want to do it, is when he plays knight g4 and take bishop, when the f-pawn retakes, the white rook is no longer on f1. It's over on d1. So for what it's worth, that opportunity is gone. Okay, so knight c5, aggressive move. But unfortunately, black is caught up in his development just about. The only piece not developed is the queen, and the queen rook is kind of developed right at the moment. It's serving a function. It's holding on to a6. So white's kind of lost some time maneuvering that knight into a better spot, but that's okay. Now black has to take on c5, which is fine, and white tries a trick. And I'm not sure if this was the best strategy, but he's given up a pawn unless there was something better. The drawback of what's going to happen is white's going to end up winning the queen, but it's going to cost him a rook and 2 minor pieces to do it. And a rook and 2 minor pieces is really, really worth way more than a queen. It's almost embarrassing. It's those 3 pieces that does it. It's not just 2 pieces, it's 3 pieces. And unless white has some really active counterplay or some pass pawns, he can start advancing up the board. Theory and practice says the queen loses. Okay, so there's that trick, as I mentioned. And there it is. Black has a rook, knight, and bishop for the queen. More than enough. My first impression is black is winning this. I don't know if white offered a draw or whatever, but it's going to be kind of hard for black to prove he can win this. But like I say, the idea is to make some exchanges and then put 3 pieces, have 3 pieces attack a pawn and go win it, and then go do that and win another pawn, and then another pawn, and then you get a pass pawn, and you start guiding that pass pawn up the board. That's the basic theme. In practice, it's a lot harder, but when you have some time, you can do it. And speaking of time, I'm just looking here at the clocks. White has used very little time. He's got more time than he started. So chances are he didn't even see some of the ideas I was showing here, because I've spent a little more time on this game than he has. I've spent 10 minutes on this recording, plus I played through it one time first to just get a feel for it. Black is probably moving a little too quick himself, but he's responded well. But the culprit here for White, you move too fast. You've got to slow down. Okay, sit on your hands, whatever. Get a lap dancer to come over and sit on your lap. She'll keep you from moving. You may not play chess well. Okay, I'm just being funny. All right, bishop e3. Probably got to do something like that. Got to get rid of those 2 bishops. Just leave black with a bishop and knight. Don't leave both bishops on the board, because the white bishop really wasn't going anywhere in this kind of position. So this is fine. And we could spend hours analyzing this whole thing out, so I'm just going to kind of run through it. White should be happy with the draw here, period. Because lots of things can happen. That b2 pawn, it can be surrounded eventually. How do you do that? Well, there's lots of ways to do it. You can you park the bishop on d5, and maybe stick your rooks naturally over on the b file, and the bishop can come down to b3. It's well secured by the rooks, and then you find a way for that knight to get into c4. I mean, these are just ideas. Of course, if black's sending everything over the queen side, black's got to watch out his king doesn't get checkmated. But with time on the clock, there's a lot of ways to find the strategy. So let's see what happens. Okay, that's nothing wrong with that. Just double the rooks. Take over that file. And it might not be a bad idea for black to just come down here and trade rooks and make this simple, but I don't know. When you have an advantage, you generally don't want to take trade pieces. Okay, so there's the bishop d5 thing I mentioned. Okay, king h2, getting him out of the way. Okay, and now there's a threat. We've got to deal with it. We can't lose that pawn. Okay, queen e5. Now doubling up, threatening to take the pawn, and if that pawn goes, ooh, that a pawn of black's is just going to loom for white, and it's going to be threatening to run up the board. So now white's kind of defending the position. Okay, black I guess brings his king over to help a little bit. Okay. Now the problem with g4 is, okay, probably nothing wrong with it. If white doesn't, he's going to get ground out. So his only chance is to try to generate some kind of play. But the drawback is, if you advance the pawns, you can start losing them. And believe it or not, that's what happens. And just gives black more advantages to play with. Now that's kind of cute. If knight takes queen, you have a nice back rank mate. I have to finish this in the next minute. Now there's an attack on that g pawn, and then I'm sure there's some counterplay going on. But the b pawn is gone. The key squares are covered. White is lost, and there went another pawn. Now the rooks are traded. White is still lost, and white finds some tricks here, and black falls into them, because now white ends up with a perpetual check draw. And I guess I didn't watch the time carefully as we're going down. Black did take his time. It looks like white finally took his time too, and found some ideas, but in time pressure, black gave up the draw. But a draw is fine with black. White can breathe easy that he saved it. Good game by both players. Thanks everyone for your time.